If you're reading this, I need you find a way to contact my local authorities for me before sunrise. You're probably asking, what the hell? And very much justified. Let me start by saying my name is not important, but for story purposes, I'll go by Richie. And I was supposed to be enjoying some fucking dank birria tacos right now at my girlfriend's, but now here I am holding a Cutco night as I write this from the closet in her parents' bedroom. Laura's parents' mansion sits alone and secluded on the outskirts of the Dallas Metroplex, nestled in one of those rich suburban landscapes where silence is as thick as the evening fog. We were supposed to be enjoying our last few days before heading back to college. Smoking, drinking, hot tub activities that aren't important. If only I had listened. No, like really listened. Richie, are you even hearing me? Laura's voice cut through my distraction. I mumbled something. My attention split between her and the Uber Eats notification on my phone. This is your Uber Eats driver. ETA is 20 minutes. Bet, I replied half-heartedly. Thanks again. It was past 2 a.m. and Laura was drunk, White Claw in hand, mid-sentence about our communication issues from this past semester, how we never truly listened to each other. The irony here would be fucking hilarious in any other situation other than this one tonight. You don't know my rising sign, or even my favorite vegetable, and it's not like I'm not telling you these things all the time. I will give her that. Babe is brash as she is chatty. Then she looked me dead in the eyes and asked, "What's even the code to get into the front door?" I confidently told her I knew it, but here's the truth. I didn't. Was it 00203 or 0308? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't about to admit that. I'm a great listener, I told her, forcing a smile. My phone buzzed again, a text from the Uber driver. "Hello, this is Diego with Uber. Can I call you?" I only half saw the message. Laura was still talking, and I was still not listening. We started to argue, the usual dance of a relationship stretched thin by distance and miscommunication. She even tossed out again if I knew her simple code to access her house, and again I deflected. "Babe, you let me in every day since we started dating." Why would I need to know that? Then another text came. This one finally caught my attention. "Answer, please. I'm scared." Something felt off. I told her she was right as I stepped into the kitchen to call Diego. His voice was timid, shaking. This is Diego. I'm your driver. I have your tacos." "Oh, thanks, bro. This is all I can try to muster since I hate small talk." "You good?" "I hit a deer," he said. "What?" But when I got out to check, there was nothing there. He paused, then added something that made my skin crawl. Then I saw her, a woman, standing by the road. She had this long dress facing an open field. Her back was turned to me. I tried to calm him down, chalking it up to the creepy dusk driving in Dallas backwoods. "Hey, you know how Dallas County treats their homeless man? Probably just a lady wandering out past the city? I'll give you a good tip, bud," I said. "Just get my jack-in-the-box to me." But Diego wasn't letting me go. "Sir, I've seen her twice now," he whispered. "I'm sorry?" "She was standing at a stop sign at 10 miles, and then I saw her again just now before calling you amigo. She was on a billboard railing, just standing there, always with her back turned." I could hear Laura in the background, asking what was taking so long. Diego was praying now, muttering in Spanish. His fear was infectious, crawling through the phone line and into my bones. "Look, I'm almost there," he said. "Can you meet me outside?" Walking over to my book bag, I grabbed my gun, just in case. "What the hell are you doing?" She caught me as I started to tuck my Smith into my back pocket. I put Diego on mute and caught her up to speed, which immediately caused her to laugh. "Vagrants are everywhere. He needs to chill out. And you," she added, grabbing for my gun. "Give me that now. You know how my parents feel about that." I didn't argue with her and handed it over. It's her house anyway, yet something didn't feel right. "Sir, fuck, I forgot Diego." "Diego?" I said quickly, unmuting and putting him on speakerphone for us both to hear. "Hey, sorry, I was grabbing my shoes. Are you here?" Silence. "Diego?" Silence, still. With him still on, I checked his GPS. He was here, right outside. Then he finally said something. Something you never want to hear at 2 a.m. "The woman," Diego forced out in almost a whisper. "She's here, my friend." My heart was in my ass now. "Diego, where is she?" "She's on the roof, back turned. Amigo, how?" Laura rolled her eyes, cocking my gun. She grabbed her jacket and headed out, telling me to stay inside and be ready to call 911 just in case. "I'll get the food and check on the driver," she said. "If someone's on the roof, call the cops. Babe, I'll just go grab it." "No, I got it," she stopped in a drunk stare. "Besides, at least I know my code." And with a smirk that said checkmate, my girlfriend headed outside. Through the door camera, I watched her approach the car. Back on with Diego, I thanked and told him Laura was on her way. Her nonchalance made me realize how silly this seemed. A woman on the roof? And did he really hit a deer? Or just trying to get a fat tip with a bizarre story? That's when I got more silence from Diego. "Hey Diego, you there? My girlfriend is walking up." "Hello?" I could hear Laura approaching on his phone. "Is anyone—" Her voice cut off. "What the fuck? Did he attack my girlfriend? Was there really a woman outside?" I ran for the door when I heard a laugh. Not Laura's laugh, someone else laughing, or trying to laugh and sound human. I stopped in my tracks. Something in me told me to not open the door. "Diego?" Silence on the other end. "Diego?" More laughter. It sounded like neither male or female. "Laura?" My phone lost signal. The Wi-Fi flickered. Then the lights went out. Fuck. The only light left in Laura's mansion was the camera security panel at the front door. I ran to it, assuming it must have its own connection separate from the house. I tried the panic button in big red digital letters, but the panel was unresponsive. Yet the camera was just fine. What was happening? And there she was, on the camera. Laura, back turned to me. In the driveway, Diego's car sat with hazards blinking. I could barely see, but his car doors were all swung open, completely empty. "Laura?" I called through the door mic. "Stop playing around." She didn't respond. "Babe?" Silence. She didn't move a muscle. "Babe, communication? Remember that?" Not a word as the bright hazard lights flashed on and off, on and off. Laura didn't move for what felt like an hour, and then, like a puppet on a strange marionette, she lifted her hand out. The way she twisted her arm made me force myself to assume it was just a camera glitch. I heard a weird crackle as she then stuck out one crooked finger and started pressing door codes. Buzz, robo, rejected, rejected, rejected. Babe, or 3. Buzz, rejected. Babe, do you need me to let you in? 000004. Buzz, rejected. She continued one code after the other, so here I am, in her parents' closet with her mom's steak knives. My gun was last with her. My phone will suddenly not connect. The security system is inoperational to send help, and yet the only thing keeping her from getting in. And I still hear her downstairs, pressing buttons. Buzz, reject. "You don't listen to me" rings through my ears from every time she ever told me that since we started dating. And now I'm sitting here, accepting she was right. I could have just admitted I don't listen and how I could do better, and hell, even asked her what the house code was. But now look at me. 00203, 00308. I'm reeling as I try to remember. Laura knows the code to her own home. Whatever that is outside does not, and it's only a matter of time before it gets it right. Not long ago, my mother stumbled upon a forgotten treasure trove of old videotapes, relics from my childhood circa 1990. Her excitement was palpable as she brought them to a photography store, eager to have the man behind the counter virtualize them, her words not mine, and transfer their contents onto a sleek modern pen drive. It struck me as absurdly poetic. Hours of clunky, analog memories distilled into a device small enough to lose between the couch cushions. The day she retrieved her tiny time capsule, she called me with the enthusiasm of someone unveiling a long-lost artifact. She suggested we meet for tea and watch the tapes together. I hesitated. Nostalgia for me has always been a double-edged sword. Old photos, childhood anecdotes, they tend to make me wince more than smile. But her excitement was genuine, almost contagious. So, despite my reluctance, I agreed. If nothing else, it seemed like a small price to pay to make her happy. When I arrived, she greeted me with a warm smile and a hug, the kind that felt like coming home. The scent of freshly brewed tea wafted through the air as she ushered me inside, handing me a tray of pastries she'd picked up from the bakery. "Set the table," she said, her voice light and full of purpose, as though this little ritual mattered more than it usually would. I obliged, arranging the sweet treats while she poured tea into delicate cups that had probably seen fewer family gatherings than they deserved. We sat together, savoring the spread she had so thoughtfully prepared, and the conversation naturally turned to my dad. His new job had taken him north to the United States, a world away. We both admitted we missed him. He'd been traveling back and forth, spending 3 months abroad at a time, and the distance felt heavier with every trip. Even the phone calls, brief and sporadic as they were, felt more like placeholders than real moments shared. At some point, I asked if she'd told my sister about the tapes. She shrugged with a nonchalant smile, the kind that only partially hides a deeper thought. "There aren't many of her," she admitted softly. "I wanted to show you first, just the two of us." There was something in her tone, an intimacy, a quiet sense of importance, that made me feel like this moment wasn't just about the tapes. It was about us. Before I could finish my second cup of tea, my mother clapped her hands with the eagerness of someone who had waited long enough. "Time to watch the tapes," she announced, her excitement spilling over. "You can finish your tea on the sofa." There was no arguing with her, so I followed her lead, carrying my cup as we moved to the living room. Setting up the TV was straightforward, though she hovered beside me, fussing over the details as if the pen drive held the secrets of the universe. I slid the tiny device into the port and took the remote, scrolling through the files that appeared on the screen. There were 7 in total, each unnamed and numbered in the order they had been filmed. No titles, no clues, just raw, unfiltered memories waiting to be unearthed. We started, naturally, with file number 1. My mother settled beside me on the sofa, her eyes bright with anticipation. The screen flickered to life, revealing nothing but a black void. The display indicated the clip was 3 minutes long, but there was no image, only darkness. Then came the sound, heavy, uneven breathing, and the faint crunch of footsteps on dry leaves, branches snapping underfoot. It sounded like someone walking through the woods, their breaths growing more labored with each step. I glanced at my mother. The excitement that had lit up her face only moments ago had vanished, replaced by a puzzled frown. "Skip ahead a bit," she suggested, her voice uneasy. I obliged, pressing the button to jump forward a few seconds. But nothing changed. The screen remained dark, the footsteps continued, and the breathing grew heavier, almost gasping now. It was then that I realized it wasn't just breathing, it was a woman. You could hear it in the way the sounds caught and faltered, like someone on the edge of tears. "Did you record this?" I asked her, my voice low. She shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line, then raised a finger to her mouth, urging me to stay quiet. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her expression tense, almost as if she were holding her breath. And then, just before the clip ended, the sobbing began. It was soft, restrained, like whoever was recording didn't want to be heard. I could tell they were trying to speak. There were faint, broken attempts at words, but nothing coherent came out, just muffled gasps swallowed by silence. My mother gripped the edge of the sofa, her knuckles white, but she said nothing. The screen cut abruptly, and for a moment the room felt impossibly still. Then, as if nothing unusual had happened, a new video began to play. My 4th birthday. The bright, joyful chaos of a child's party filled the screen, but neither of us moved. We just sat there, caught between confusion and unease, trying to make sense of what we had just witnessed. When the last video ended, my mom and I sat in silence. The room felt heavy, though neither of us said a word. After a moment, I remembered the tea in my hands and took a sip, only to grimace at its coldness. My mother noticed immediately, her eyes flicking to the cup. "Do you want me to heat that up?" she asked, but before I could answer, she had already taken it from my hands and disappeared into the kitchen. I followed her, the silence still hanging between us like an unspoken question. Leaning against the doorway, I asked the thing that had been circling in my mind. "What do you think that first video was?" She paused, glancing at me as she set the cup in the microwave. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, but then she smiled, a light, dismissive smile, as though brushing away a stray thought. "Oh, it was probably some mistake," she said with a wave of her hand. "The man at the store must have put it on the pen drive by accident. I'll go ask him about it tomorrow." Her tone was casual, practiced even, but I couldn't tell if it was meant to reassure me or herself. The microwave beeped, and she pulled the cup out, cradling it as if the warmth in her hands might soothe her own unease. "What did you think of the other videos?" she asked, her voice softening as she handed me the tea. "You were such a pretty little girl back then. Oh, how I miss those times." Her words hung in the air, but my mind lingered on the video, on the sound of that woman's breaths and sobs. My mom's attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere didn't feel wrong, but it didn't feel right either. I sipped my tea and nodded, letting her nostalgia fill the silence, though the unease from that first video remained, quietly gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. By the time I left my mother's house, the sky was fading into dusk, the air carrying the weight of an ending day. Before I stepped out, I asked her if I could take the pen drive with me to show it to my husband. She smiled and handed me a second one. "I had a copy made for you," she said. "It was always meant to be yours." When I arrived home, the house was quiet, still bathed in the soft glow of evening. I set my bag down and went straight to my laptop, eager to revisit the tapes, though the memory of that first video lingered uneasily in my mind. As the laptop hummed to life, I slid the pen drive into its port, expecting nothing more than what I'd already seen. But as the files loaded, something new caught my eye. A second folder, one that hadn't shown up on the TV. My curiosity piqued. I clicked on it. Inside were a handful of corrupted documents, files with strange, unreadable names, and a single video. My heart quickened as I hovered over it, the unease from earlier stirring again. I clicked, and the screen opened, dark and familiar. Like the first video from my mother's house, the image was nothing but blackness, but the sound told a different story. The woman's sobbing was more frantic now, her breaths harsh and desperate. The cracks of branches beneath her feet came faster, sharper, as if she were running. Then came the rain, soft at first, then heavier, joined by the low rumble of thunder. The atmosphere thickened, the soundscape alive with tension. And then, out of the void, a flash of light. A bolt of lightning struck a tree, illuminating the screen for a fleeting moment. I froze, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Without thinking, I hit pause. The stillness that followed was deafening. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The ghostly outline of the illuminated tree burned into my vision. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Something about that single frame felt too real, too deliberate. And for the first time that night, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep watching. I steeled myself and pressed play. The burning tree remained in the frame, its flames casting flickering shadows that gave the scene an eerie semblance of life. The camera swayed erratically, capturing glimpses of the turbulent sky above and the muddy ground below. It felt chaotic, disorienting, like watching through the eyes of someone barely holding on. Then came the roar, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the speakers and into my chest. It wasn't human, and whatever it was, it drove the woman into a desperate sprint. Her sobs turned to frantic cries, her voice trembling as she murmured something about God under her breath. The words were too soft to catch, but their despair was unmistakable. A deafening boom rang out, an explosion so jarring that it made me flinch. The woman stumbled, her breathing ragged as the camera tilted violently, and then she fell. The screen glitched, the image fragmenting into streaks of static, but when it cleared, the camera had landed on the ground, its lens now pointing directly at her. I couldn't see her face, only the back of her head, her short brown hair matted with rain and dirt. She crawled toward the camera, her trembling fingers brushing against its edges. Then, just as she reached for it, she whispered something, a single word. My heart sank like a stone, my chest tightening as if the air had been sucked from the room. A strange weightlessness took over my body, and I became hyper-aware of everything around me, the soft hum of my laptop, the ticking of the clock, even the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. But I couldn't move. My limbs felt disconnected from my will, my mind too consumed by what I had just witnessed. I couldn't blink. I couldn't breathe. I was frozen in that moment, trapped by a fear I didn't fully understand. It wasn't just the video, it was the way it had burrowed into my mind, unraveling something deep within me. I wanted to look away, to close the laptop, to do anything to break free from the paralysis that gripped me. But I didn't. Or perhaps I didn't want to. Something about the stillness, the helplessness, kept me tethered to that screen, as if moving would shatter the fragile veil between reality and whatever dark truth I had just glimpsed. Then, a single thought pierced through the haze of fear and confusion. It cut through the stillness like a blade, sharp and undeniable. She said my name. I'd 28F, been with Daniel 29Me for almost 3 years. Things were great until this August, when he started commenting about how I always hid my phone. I didn't, and was wearing special perfume to work. I wasn't. A friend of his, Greg, worked in the same building as me, and Daniel claimed Greg said I was very, very close to one of my male co-workers. Ever since then, Daniel basically danced around accusing me of having regular sex at the office. He never said this directly, but it reached the point where there was never a day when I could simply relax without worrying about a snide remark. Then, out of nowhere, he insisted we go hiking one afternoon. We set off late and weren't too far along the trail before the conversation circled towards how busy I'd been lately. "I'm not accusing anybody of anything," he said, all defensive. "I'm just saying it's weird is all." He marched along the steep path so fast I needed to jog to keep up. Above our heads, past the ceiling of trees, the light was growing thin, and on either side of us was a thick tangle of jagged nettles and hanging ivy. "Maybe we should turn back?" I asked, squinting up at the side of the mountain. "I'm starting to feel a chill. And I suppose that's my fault as well. I said you should have brought a heavier jacket." A little tremor of fear ran through me. I continued with my head down, sidestepping the little ditches while Daniel ducked beneath the lowest branches cutting across the path. We hadn't passed another hiker for more than 20 minutes. He said, "It isn't just me who thinks this, by the way. Greg told me everyone makes jokes about you and your office boyfriend." That wasn't true. Daniel was just fishing for intel. Part of me wanted him to lay the cards on the table, but a confrontation might have ended with us screaming at each other. Or worse. I said, "I really think we should head back. At this rate, it's going to be pitch black before we can even sniff the summit." In an exaggerated display, he grabbed his phone and yelled, "Oh, what's this? The fun police again. Damn. They said they're getting reports I'm enjoying myself for once and need to shut it down." Neither of us breathed a word as we walked on, and soon we only had the moonlight to see by. When my breath started misting up and my fingertips turned blue, I said, "Listen, keep going if you like, but I'm heading back to the car. Hopefully if I get to the doctor quick enough, they can save my hands from frostbite." "Fine," Daniel said, the corners of his mouth curling into a mean-spirited grin. "Just watch out for Harper the Hook." His expression made my blood boil, despite the massive drop in temperature. Daniel's fun personality lured me in at first, but after 3 years his cruel jokes had become stale and tasteless. "Don't even start," I said, turning away. "You mean you never heard about Harper? He's a local legend." A gust of raw air whistled through the trees, making their limbs scrape together roughly. Shivering, I let out a little sigh and caught up with Daniel, who said, "So anyway, they call him Harper the Hook. I don't want to hear." And he was a butcher in the old days. He built a fancy factory right here on this mountain and employed men from the nearby towns. And soon he was making mega bucks, which meant he could get pussy on tap. But he fell for this one lady, real girl next door type. They got married, and Harper thought he'd found his happy ending, but the poor bastard couldn't have been more wrong. Daniel paused to see whether he had a captive audience. I folded my arms and made it clear I wasn't listening, but since when had that stopped him? See, what Harper didn't know is his gal was the town bicycle. She had 5 boyfriends all feeding her the pipe, but he was completely clueless until he went looking for this expensive watch he'd lost. Going through the dirty washing, he realized one of his wife's blouses smelled like pig's blood, and even he wasn't naive enough to explain it away, so he started following her. Eventually, he caught her sneaking into the factory late at night to get nasty with one of his employees, in the abattoir of all places. Nearby, a tangle of bushes rustled. I shuffled closer to Daniel and said, "What was?" "So anyway," Daniel continued, "a fight breaks out, then the worker tackled Harper onto the conveyor line, and this meat hook dangling from a chain went into his back and straight through his heart. But this is before health and safety, so he got dragged into the meat grinder, along with all the pig carcasses." Deadwood snapped, somewhere left of the trail. And you want to know the worst part? The wife and her lover didn't say a word. They just took Harper's fortune and vanished. Nobody knew what happened until some lady bit into a pork sausage and found an eyeball staring back at her. Now this is where the story gets really tasty. "Facing me," he said, "years after Harper's death, a couple came up here one night and heard a scraping sound. The guy threw himself in front of his girl just as a hook on the end of a chain came flying out of the darkness and pierced his heart. The poor guy got dragged away before he even knew he was dead. The girl went to the police, and she had to confess the guy who vanished was engaged, and she was the bit on the side. They combed the area, but all they found was a shoe. Then a few months later, a lady was out with her husband for a hike when she got impaled and vanished too. Now here's the twist. A secret boyfriend turned up at the funeral, and that's how they realized Harper had a type. See, it turned out he only killed people who... Something cut through the trees, reflecting the moonlight as it went. I said, "Daniel, I think I just saw something." "Oh, is it a homicidal ghost that stalks serial cheaters?" He expelled a low whistle. His teeth were bared now. "Because if I were you, I'd be shitting myself." Whatever caught my eye vanished into the gloom. But the fear had set in, and I couldn't leave by myself. Daniel had set the trap. Attempting to regain my composure, I looked at him and said, "I thought you didn't believe in that supernatural crap." "I don't, but you do. So maybe play it safe and confess your sins. Maybe Harper will go easy on you." "I already let you read my messages. Isn't that enough? Like that proves anything. I'd bet you're sending nudes on Snapchat." "Can we please just go?" He grabbed me by the arm, tight enough that the fingers bit into my skin. "Why are you in such a hurry?" "Because it's freezing," I said, struggling to break his grip with my free hand. "I think you're scared, but you know what? You're going to stay right here until I hear a confession." "You're crazy." "Am I? Why not just come out and admit it? How many times do I have to?" "Did you think I'm stupid?" he snapped, his temper rising. Even in the darkness, I could see his face turn bright red, the anger in his eyes. "Did you think I'd never figure it out?" "There's nothing to fig." He yanked me in close, nose to nose, and said, "Just tell the truth, you filthy tramp." Unable to break his grip, I slapped Daniel clean across the face. He rubbed his cheek in a state of shock. I tried bolting away, but from behind he grabbed me by the hair and hurled me against the nearest tree, hard enough to knock the air out of my lungs. "You fucking bitch, look what you made me do," he said, as his hands clamped tight around my throat. "Why couldn't you have just made this easy?" As the pressure in my skull built up, everything in my window of vision blurred. Daniel had completely lost his mind. I couldn't spit out a cry for help or pry his fingers loose. My body went limp, and everything cut to black until, suddenly, I could breathe again. I was lying in a sprawled heap in the dirt, too concerned with dragging air into my lungs to care about Daniel, who advanced on the brush. His head snapped toward a rustling hedge just off the trail. He faced the thicket and shouted, "Who's there?" There came a low, carving sound of metal being raked across wood. Whatever caused it advanced on us, steadily drawing louder and closer. Using the tree for support, I pulled myself up, still gasping. I'd barely straightened my legs before Daniel spun around and knocked me aside. My fearless protector tried to run, but instead came to an abrupt halt. Confused, I rubbed my eyes until a majority of the brain fog cleared. Beneath Daniel's collarbone, right where the heart would be, the end of a curved hook burst through the skin. Razor sharp and stained dark red. It was attached to a thick, heavy metal chain that had stretched out of the darkness and pierced his back. Still fixed in midair, the chain jangled. Then, inch by inch, it began to retract. Daniel vomited a fat wad of juicy blood into the dirt and fell backwards, his body completely limp. And then I could only watch, frozen in horror, as my boyfriend got reeled away into the darkness,